You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Welcome back to the Sons of Shoe. Nick Wilson, Spencer German, and today's going to be a little different. We're reacting to the NFL draft, and the Ohio State focus is kind of where we're going to go. The four draftees, the several undrafted free agents from Ohio State, where they landed, and of course, what it means for Ohio State. But as we are a relatively new podcast, please make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, 923thefan.com, the free Odyssey app. If I mentioned Apple, please follow the show. And, of course, follow 923 The Fan's YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button there and then like our videos. We do appreciate your patronage. But hi, Spencer. How you doing?
Good, man. Busy weekend with the draft, and I think really just sports in general. There was a lot going on this weekend. So, but doing well. And, I'm excited to talk about the draft a little bit. How about you? How was your weekend?
Well, yeah, between three Guardians games, the Cavaliers game, the overall NBA playoffs, basically 3-4 games a day, and then the NFL draft, like I didn't really have a weekend. Oh, and I did a 5-hour national show on Saturday, smack dab in the middle of the Cavs playoff game and day 3 of the NFL draft. So like, and let me be clear. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, holy crap, that was a lot.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those weekends where you kind of collect yourself on Monday and you look back on the weekend and you're like, holy shit, I did a lot. Like I was pretty damn busy. I think I felt that way too, just with everything I had going on with the draft. But yeah, definitely a busy weekend.
And I don't know that there's a non-sporting event, meaning a non-game sporting event that I watch with the ferocity that I watch the NFL draft. Like, I'll be honest, dude, like I watched every second, like to the point I was falling asleep on Thursday night in my chair and knowing I had to wake up at 5:45 to get up with my oldest daughter. And then Friday night, same damn thing, watching till, the wee hours of the night. I think it went on to 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't know because I could barely stay awake. And then, I'm hosting a 5-hour national show starting at noon on Saturday. And I have the Cavs up on the TV to my right, and I have the NFL draft on my laptop here. And I just got to be honest with you, dude, the NFL draft to me is a flawless event because if your team has a bunch of picks, man, you're so invested and maybe you paid more attention to the college game that year because, you want to see who's going to become the next LA Ram or the next Detroit Lion or the next Cleveland Browns. And then if you don't have, like the Browns didn't have a first-round pick this year, or if you don't have a lot of picks in general, you have massive FOMO. So, like, I have a buddy who's a Bears fan who had the 1st and 9th pick. Once they made that pick, it was like late day 2 where they had a pick again, and he was like texting me. He's like, man, what am I doing here? I can't wait to pick 75. So, like, I just think it was really – and so to me – it is the flawless event. Every fan can be happy on draft day, even if you don't like your draft picks. And again, it is one of my favorite events every year. And that's a wild thing to say, considering there are no winners or losers declared truly till about 3 years later.
So it's funny you have that stance on it. And listen, I'll say this, like I enjoy watching the draft from home. I actually said, though, on Sunday on 92.3, I had the take that I think the NFL has brainwashed us into thinking that we need to, like, participate in the NFL draft, and it's really not as and I mean this from, like, a standpoint of, like, the crowds in Detroit. Like, listen, props to the Detroit folks for showing up and showing out, setting the record for attendance. But
allegedly, we don't know that. We don't know we can trust those numbers.
That's fair. That's fair. It's
that's Michigan math.
They might have been flying in some fake people on planes and dropping them in, and just like the election.
Does that include the prostitutes that were in town for such a big event
and the strippers? Like how the strippers show up to the Super Bowl cities too.
Yep.
No, my thing is though, I can sit and watch the draft at home and enjoy it and get through and be fine. I think the people that stand there for that, and listen, night one is one thing. Like, okay, I get if your team, especially if you're like a Bears fan, I get showing up in Detroit and being there to see Caleb Williams come out, and you had a pick in another pick in the top 10. So it was like there was all this excitement early on. But I can't imagine going to like day 2 and day 3 of this thing, just standing there. Like, you're not watching anything. You're just watching people walk out and announce picks. So I think the draft is cool. I've always enjoyed the draft. It's a lot of fun to cover. I don't think it seems like the least enjoyable experience ever to be there in person for it. I couldn't do it.
But they had 5 current Detroit Lions come out and hype the crowd up by saying, "Come on, let's go." All right, now you. Hey, you know what I'm hearing? Jared Goff. Man, those Lions players might be biting kneecaps, but they sure as hell cannot get a crowd riled up there.
And so what I compare it to, Nick, is from what I've heard, and I know, like, my mother-in-law, she's always told us one of her bucket list items is to go to New Year's Eve at Times Square. And anybody I know who's ever gone to New Year's Eve in Times Square, they say it's actually a miserable experience because you get put in this like gated thing, and you're just in this gated thing, and you don't leave, and you stand there for hours. And if you got to go to the bathroom, you have to like leave, and it's like this complicated thing to get back. Like you basically can't leave for hours, and then you just wait for the payoff is 10 seconds of the ball or the minute of the ball dropping on the thing, and then you get to say Happy New Year in New York City. That's the payoff, and they're like, yeah, it's not real. The juice isn't worth the squeeze on that. I just feel like from a home viewing experience, being at the draft in person feels like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Maybe I'm wrong. I know we had it in Cleveland a couple years ago. It definitely wasn't worth the squeeze that year because it was the COVID year. But I just, I don't know. I don't think being there in person is for me.
Well, now we got to get it back so we can know for certain whether it's worth being there in person or not.
Yeah.
But while we're on the topic of the draft, which is going to be the entire topic of today's show, in case you guys haven't figured that out one yet, 4 Buckeyes were drafted this year. The first one off the board, as expected, was Marvin Harrison Jr. And, was it Arizona? Was it going to be New England? Was it going to be maybe Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers? And in the end, he goes pick 4 to the Arizona Cardinals. And I don't know about you, but now, then this is funny because people in the NFL are a little bit down on Kyler Murray. Marvin Harrison Jr. is finally going to play with a level of quarterback that deserves his level of talent.
Yeah, I think, what I found sort of funny about the whole thing was after all the smoke screen season stuff of, his tape just doesn't wow you. And I think a lot of that was just you watch the guy's tape over and over again that you're like at a point where it's like, okay, I've seen it all. How much more excited can I get about this guy? And people were trying to hype up Malik Neighbors as potentially the first receiver to go. And so I just thought it was funny that in the end, he goes probably where he should have gone as what many people considered the top non-quarterback prospect in the entire class. And he goes as the first pick that was a non-quarterback. So that felt very fitting. And I do think on some level, like, yeah, there's questions about Kyler Murray and his desire to care about football, I guess, on some level, his commitment with the video game stuff that was in his contract and all these different things. But I think Kyler, like, especially late last year when he got back from the knee injury, he looked really good. He started to look like the quarterback that we knew from a couple of years ago. And, second year with in the offense that he's in with the new head coach, and you get a chance to add a weapon in Marvin Harrison Jr. And listen, let's face it, like, the Cardinals needed it. They lost all their wide receivers this offseason. Hollywood Brown isn't coming back. Obviously, the offseason before that, you lose DeAndre Hopkins. So he steps in day one as like their number 1 wide receiver and gets a chance to really prove himself with a quarterback who I think can certainly make the most out of his talent. And I think that's the key thing too, Nick. Like, we always talk about situation mattering. To go somewhere where you already have an established quarterback, I think is a good thing. I think Marvin Harrison is like the rare example of, even if he had a bad quarterback, he would still put up numbers because he's that good. But to go somewhere where you have some stability at that position, I think is huge for him.
Well, and I think, I'll be honest with you. I think we've just kind of started to hate on young Kyler because people bestowed him the label as franchise quarterback, and then they got a $200 million contract and all this. I mean, the guy just hasn't had a chance to prove it because he hasn't been healthy.
Yeah.
So, and I think if you look at it, like, Nuke Hopkins, when Nuke was healthy with Kyler, that was a top 5 quarterback wide receiver tandem in the NFL. And I think Marvin, it's funny, man, like, obviously we saw Marvin with CJ Stroud, and they had a really good relationship, but it never really felt like Ryan Day fully unleashed CJ Stroud, right? It felt like there were things that you could have done with CJ, like watching CJ just move. She's actually really, really mobile. And, I don't think he was ever destined to be a running quarterback, but that's because he's such a good passer and he's so good in the pocket, he doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot about why did Ryan Day wait till the Georgia game to get CJ Stroud moving? I mean, I kind of look at this and I think to myself, I don't know that Marvin has ever had a quarterback fully at his disposal that was being fully unleashed by a system, by a play caller. And obviously this year, I'll be honest with you, when I watched Marvin back, and I think I said this in the last podcast, when I watched Marvin back, it was when you watch throw after throw after throw by Kyle McCord from this last year, the trend is obvious. The ball is almost never on time. And when I say on time, I mean leading him to be able to make the next big play.
Yeah. There was a few, but that was it. Yeah.
Everything Marvin had to do this last year was adjust on the fly, which I thought showed a incredible athletic IQ, that he was still able to turn some of those whoops. You're going this way, he throws behind you, and you make it seem like a flawless catch and a seamless transition and into a 50-yard play. That's what he did with a quarterback who, again, I just don't think was good enough to truly be Marvin Harrison Jr. or Ohio State's quarterback. You now go with Kyler Murray. And again, I think the stock is down on him. I don't know Kyler's ever going to be a top 5 quarterback, but consistently, can he be a top 12 quarterback? 100%.
Yeah.
And can Marvin Harrison Jr., listen, how I build a roster, and this is probably another thing that I've bored you with, how I build the roster is get me strong in the trenches and we'll talk from there. I know Arizona does have Paris Johnson. They've started to build in the trenches. I don't know they have the kind of trench warfare that you need to be consistently good every single year. But once you get outside the trenches on both sides of the ball, the next best friend a quarterback can have is an elite wide receiver. And I think Marvin steps into the NFL with the right quarterback to let him hit the ground running. He will not have to be the only playmaker there like he was for half this last year when Travion was out and Emeka was out. This is a dude who's stepping into an NFL offense with a legit NFL quarterback with legit playmakers around him, and I think that'll only make him more dangerous in college or in the pros. And you might be able to make a case he might end up being a more productive, not a better, because he's still the talented guy. He might end up even being more productive in the NFL than he was in college because of this marriage with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you're looking for if people are concerned about his ability to, get the most out of Marvin or whatever, people can't forget it wasn't so long ago that when Kyler was healthy and he had DeAndre Hopkins healthy as well and on his roster, that first year they were together, Hopkins had 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns, and over 100 catches. He's proven that when he has an elite wide receiver, he's going to get him the football and he's going to make him a productive player. I think you can even look at last year when he finally was able to play with Hollywood Brown, and even the year before that when they were playing together for a good portion of the season. I mean, Hollywood Brown, who's a fine receiver, he's only gone over 1,000 yards one time in his career. He had over 700 yards and 3 touchdowns that first year together, and then last year had 574. But again, with varying quarterback play until Kyler was able to come back and play, and those last couple weeks were some of his best weeks of the season. So yeah, I think Kyler's clearly a guy that's going to get the most out of that player, that position. When he has a talented wide receiver, he's going to use them, and I think it's a good spot for Marv to land, and probably the right spot in terms of the pick that he was selected. Like I said, being the first non-quarterback to go. Here's an interesting hypothetical for you, Nick. So if the Cardinals had traded, let's say the Cardinals had traded out and the Vikings traded up and got JJ McCarthy or something like that, whatever. If the Chargers wound up being the team on the clock to take the first non-quarterback, do you think that, because did you hear Jim Harbaugh's quote about how his quote about offensive linemen and how and they consider offensive linemen weapons or whatever?
Yeah.
Do you think he was so inclined to take a offensive lineman because that's just the Jim Harbaugh way that he would have still not taken Marvin Harrison Jr.? Or do you think he would have taken Marvin Harrison Jr. if he would have been there at 5?
I think he would have taken Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5. I just think it was. And by the way, I love
because here's the thing.
I love they picked Joe Alt, by the way, but yeah. I think he would have gone Marvin.
I just think Jim Harbaugh is such a different breed, man. Like I think he's so in his own. He's going to do things his way. Like I wouldn't have been surprised. Now listen, we'll never know, but I wouldn't have been surprised if he ended up taking Alt anyway. And it was like, yeah, no, we just felt like we really need offensive linemen. We're trying to protect our quarterback, and we're going to build this thing in the trenches. And I consider offensive linemen a weapon. And everyone's sitting there like, well, why didn't you take Marvin Harrison Jr.? So I thought that was an interesting question because that was the talk, right? Was if he's there at 5, does he take him in the whole Ohio State-Michigan ties? But I found that kind of funny.
All right, guys, do you think Marvin Harrison Jr. will walk into the NFL as one of the 10 or 15 best wide receivers? I think the situation's right for him. I think it's all about health in his rookie year. Leave your comments on the 92.3 The Fan YouTube channel under each of our videos there. Make sure to hit us with a like as well, or at Nick Wilson Says on X and Threads, or Instagram if you want to be cheeky and slide to my DMs, or at Spencito _ on X. When we come back, there were 3 other Buckeyes drafted. We'll get into that, and the numbers don't lie. But real quick, a quick word from our sponsors.